You're supposed to be my grandpa! 2! Hey, stop that, that's mine.
Well, you don't like me doing this?
That's private.
So's my house.
All right. You made your point? Give it to me, will ya?
Why? You got something to hide?
No. Do you?
What'd you do?
I was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
You got a real knack for that.
Like I said, you don't know me.
I know you're a grown man whose mama still has to look after him.
Yeah, well, we can't all conquer the world like you clearly have.
I have what I need. Which is more than you can say, or else you wouldn't be here.
I won't be here long.
Where are you going?
Anywhere but this dump.
It's 22 miles to the nearest town. Be sure to light a fire at night. The coyotes get hungry this time of year.
Welcome to Coffee and Words, the show where I drink coffee and talk to people way more interesting than me. If you're not familiar with Rick McVey, you should be. So Rick McVey has spent most of his life telling stories. He has narrated dozens of fiction and nonfiction books over the past 10 years, including the Time Assassins and Tri-System Authority trilogies and several other Jumpmaster Press titles. After a 17-year stint as a full-time member of the resident acting company at Barter Theater, Rick retired from theater at the beginning of 2020 and has appeared in numerous film and television projects, including, most recently, and my personal favorite topic of today, the 2024 release, Searching for the Elephant, and roles in 2 other award-winning feature films, an acclaimed web series, and several short films. He was honored to be chosen as a 2022 recipient of the Arts Achievement Award from the Arts Alliance of the Mountain Empire in Virginia. He's a graduate of East Tennessee State University, where he was awarded the Bud Frank Award for Excellence in Theater. Rick was inducted into the ETSU Department of Communications Alumni Hall of Fame in 2010. And he has spent much of his career in broadcasting. He served as production manager at WOPI Radio and director of production at WCYB TV. He has performed and directed scores of shows at Theater Bristol, where he served for a time as producing director. He was also the producing director of the Don't Touch That Dial radio theater company for 6 years. Okay, that's exciting. We're going to have to come back to that in a minute. He's a native of Southwest Virginia, and he and his wife Lola have 3 children and 7 amazing grandchildren. I could go on forever, Rick. I feel really, underqualified to have you on the show today, and I am super excited.
I'm just old. I'm just old. I've just done a bunch of stuff because I'm old.
Wow. Well, that gives us all like a reason to age and embrace age, right? Like that whole, the longer the years, the longer the bio, right?
You did a great job. You covered the whole thing. So
now
right down to the kids.
Yeah. Well, as a new grandparent myself, that is such a cool relationship, right? It's totally different than the parenting thing. Totally different ballgame.
Yep. And it's great. I mean, we've got 7 grandkids. They range from 4 to 19.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. So it's been, and in fact, right now, this week, my wife and I are babysitting our 4 and 6-year-olds because my daughter and her husband are on a anniversary trip. So we're babysitting this week. So, I mean, the great thing about being a grandparent is you do get a chance to just hang around, spoil them, and then get out of town.
Yes. It's my favorite part.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, they're in a fussy mood. See ya. I'm out of here.
But it's fun. We really are. We're really blessed. We have been, for 19 years with great grandkids. So, well, terrific grandkids. We don't have any great grandkids yet.
No, you're not that old, right?
No.
Yeah.
Well,
the bio is not that long yet.
That's
so,
right. That's right.
That's a whole other level.
Right. But anyway,
Yeah.
so it's good.
Yeah. Well, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
You have had a very long and illustrious career, as we have just discussed. And I love that the opening of your bio is about storytelling, and that just sort of encompasses what your life has been about. I feel like that's what my life has been about. I feel like we have so much in common, so much that we can discuss because we're both lovers of story, and the art that is, telling story, which is telling about humanity.
Yeah.
So, tell me a little bit about how you got into theater and what that's done for your life.
Okay. Well, first of all, let me back up just for a second on the
Uh-oh.
idea of storytellers. No, that's good. That's good. I think sometimes people use that phrase storyteller and storytelling in a sort of what's the word I want to use, gratuitous way. I think what you're talking about is exactly what I feel like storytelling is, and that's just revealing the human condition. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that. But to go back, I guess I started out, this is going to sound silly, but when I was in the second grade, I was in a talent show at my elementary school. And all I did was like a pantomime routine of a Little Richard song. And it went over great. I mean, I actually had people who came to me and they offered to pay me money to go to another place to do that bit.
Wow.
I thought I was the thing. I put a star on my bedroom door. I don't remember this, but my mom told me about it. And, but that was, I'm sure that was the beginning of like, oh, you can do things that people will like enjoy and get a kick out of. And so I like a lot of people, you do theater through school, and I really started to get serious about trying to do theater, though. I was in high school, 17 years old, maybe, and did a couple of things in the community theater. And then we had a children's theater there in Bristol where I was growing up. And so I started doing some plays with the children's theater, which I think if anybody has the opportunity to do children's theater, it is the best, because kids are going to be so honest. They're going to tell you exactly that you're either going to be with them or they're not,
Yeah.
and it's great training, and it's fun because you have a chance to really stretch and do all these different strange characters, and they can be cartoons, but one of the things that I tried to learn, and it's a continuing process, is how to keep those wild characters grounded, and so that they don't get so out of sync with what the rest of the play, what the rest of the story is. And that's just also good training. I mean, it's also a good practice, a good thing to get into. I remember it was easy to make people laugh, but I can remember the first time I heard an audience cry.
Oh, wow.
I was doing, the play Same Time Next Year.
I don't think I've heard of that one.
It's Bernard Slade, I think, wrote it, and it's a two-hander. It's about a man and a woman who have an affair, but they only meet one weekend out of the year.
Oh.
And the play progresses over their lives over like 25 years, and how they change and the things that they go through. The play now, it wouldn't work now because it's dated, because a lot of the references were of the period. But there's one scene where my character is in his 40s. And of course, the woman is in her 40s too. We meet. She's sort of become a hippie. I'm this real straight-laced business type where we have changed over time. Anyway, and then I tell the story about how my son Michael was killed in Vietnam. And it's just such a shift in that play, because it's basically a comedy. But in that moment, everything shifts, and you begin to see these people as more rounded. And I can remember hearing people sob. Now that's not, I'm not, this is not a way to brag about it. I'm just saying that they got caught up in the story.
Yeah.
And that was the first time that had ever happened to me. And I was a young actor. I was, in my 20s. And it was tough enough to try to play somebody who was in their 40s. It's tougher now to play somebody in their 40s because I'm so far away from it. But that was just a real eye opener for me. Anyway, and I kept doing theater like that on a pretty regular basis until my wife and I started having kids. And then it's a hard business. It's a hard business to raise a family in. And at the same time I was doing theater, I had also been working in radio at a local radio station, and then transferred that into TV. And so those two things were going side by side. But during the time when the kids were growing up, the theater part of it got to be less and less what I was doing. I did some, but less and less of it. And then when they got older and they started moving out, that's when I started to get serious about it again. So,
did they ever come watch you, or were they ever backstage?
Oh yeah. Actually, one time we were doing a Christmas Carol. This was I guess it was at Theater Bristol, and my son, who is now in his 40s, I think he was 8 or 9 years old, and he played the young Scrooge in a scene. The scene when they go to get him at the school.
Yes.
And my son played that part. I guess that's probably the only time I actually did a show with one of my kids. They came to shows all the time, of course. And then talking about the grandkids, when I was working at Barter, my oldest grandson was very, very young. The first time he saw Beauty and the Beast, he was like 3, and he wanted to be Gaston. And, I was not Gaston, so he didn't want to be me. But he wanted to be Gaston. But he got to, he would go backstage and see a lot of the tunnels and things that are underneath the stage, and he was really just entranced by the whole thing.
Yeah, I think it's so important to bring kids up early in that. And I mean, back to the humanity aspect of storytelling. I mean, how important do you think it is that, storytelling does resonate with people? You're talking about getting this visceral reaction from the audience. And story is so powerful that way, but I think it's because it connects to those very personal places in each of us, our life experiences and people that we know. So, I mean, how important is that? Especially, I think that, there's so many people who maybe don't take advantage of the opportunities of engaging with story on that level and its many aspects.
Well, really, if you start breaking it down, and this, and I'm sure a lot of people who are listening to this podcast will know it as well, but story really is characters doing things, and characters do things. That's it. That's what makes a character. It's not what we say; it's what that character does that defines the character, and that doing is what I think people. That's what engages them. Because if they see this character go through whatever it is, and I've done some horrific things on stage as a character, and still tried, even in the face of this guy being a horrible person, tried to find something about him that gave him some avenue of sympathy that the audience could feel.
Yeah.
Even though Bright Star, the musical Bright Star. It's Steve Martin did some of the music, and Edie Brickell. And anyway, there's a scene in there, and the character that I played was the mayor of this town, and his son and this girl have a baby, and the girl's on the wrong side of the tracks, and so my guy wants to get rid of the baby, and I'm not going to give away too much of the plot, but I throw the baby off a train. Yeah, it was.
Wow.
It was. I mean, it was bad. It's the way that the act ends, and then. So how do you come back from that? How do you get an audience's sympathy when you just did that? And for me, it was a matter of, and the next time we see him is some months later, and the scene is not necessarily written for him to be as contrite, but you know how you play the scene. I was playing it with the actor that played my son, and it's the approach that you take to trying to deal with the moment. And if it's with contrition, I mean, it's not like you break down. It's just something that's internal that comes through because you allow it to. You can't generate it, But, anyway, that kind of thing to me is what will keep people engaged with the character, even a character they don't like. And so they'll uh, still stay engaged with the story, and I think it enriches the experience because we
Yeah.
begin to realize that the evil people in our lives still are people, you know?
Yeah. And those moments where you recognize a little bit of yourself in that person, not necessarily the evil, but when you realize how much you have in common with people that even you may not have thought of, well, I'm not like that person, but it really does, it puts us in touch with humanity. I think it's storytelling in general, but there's so many different aspects of it, whether it's books or film or art, theater. There's so many, and music. It's all story, but being able to really engage with our community and with other people on a different level, to me, is so important. The way that we see people and our understanding of people, and I think it's just such a deeper thing. It's not just entertainment. So I always hate when, we approach it something just for entertainment value, which there's value in that too, and it's a beautiful thing. But really, the way that the lens in which we view our world, to me, is so important.
Well, and the willingness, I think as an actor, it's been so much more fun for me to allow myself to go through a lot of those experiences, to actually try to put myself in the place of this person,
Yeah.
and to let that, I don't want to sound grandiose, but to let it live in you, so you can experience that. And it enriches me as a person, and then hopefully enriches my ability as an actor to portray a character in a way that is going to enrich the person who's watching the scene or the story or whatever, actually get engaged.
Yeah.
I really think that so much of acting is so subconscious,
Mm-hmm.
and it goes on. By definition, since it's subconscious, we can't control it, but when it's at its richest, all those things happen and you don't even perceive the different things that are going on, all the different little facial things or verbal things or physical things, because they're subconscious. They're happening on that level, and the audience receives that, I think, on that level. They receive it subconsciously. They're not sitting there going, "Oh, you see his eye twitch like that." No,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Right.
And that's so fun to allow, because that to me is the most exciting part of acting. Is
Yes.
when that happens and you go and you've heard many people talk about it. You get to a show and you don't even remember having done the thing because you were so engaged in doing the thing.
Yeah. 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 It's very instinctual.
Yeah.
Is what I always like to say. And so let's talk about that. Let's talk about your process, how you get into these roles, into these characters, and how that changes you as a person, or what is that impact that each different role has had on you.
Yeah, well, in general, I mean, every time everything's a little bit different in the way you approach it. But and certain plays require certain procedures, I think. I did a play once called Thicker Than Water. And it's a very, very interesting play about, I can't remember the lady's name, based on true story, a lady who drowned her children. She had mental issues, obviously. And I played like not a prosecutor, but an investigator with the police department. And so these were all taken from transcripts. And so this was opposite of the way normally that I would work on a play. But I had to, because it was done by transcript, we were instructed to learn it word by word, pause by pause, by ers, I mean, instead of saying it has a, and I'm saying that process was really, really difficult because it was more about a matter of trying to follow this roadmap exactly, and then go back and fill in what was going on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's very mechanical.
Yeah.
And so it must have been harder to get into the moment of the character.
Very much. And part of that too was valuable because it's, again, we're talking about a really dark subject. And it was very powerful. We had after each performance, we had like a team of psychiatrists and social workers that would answer questions from the audience, and it was a good experience, a good process. But it was hard because of that. It's not to say it's impossible. It's obviously you once you lay down that track, then you go back and you start trying to fill in the blanks from an internal standpoint. But that's like I said, that's totally opposite the way that I normally would like to work. Normally, what I do, I read a script and get just a sense for what's going on. I'll start to look at the character in moment by moment by moment. What's he trying to do here? What's he trying to do there? And then in the process of rehearsal, if it's a play, in the process of rehearsal, I try to simply just rehearse those thought processes. I carry the script with me and I'll refer to it. But at some point, and this is a rather late development in the way that I learned to build a character. But I put the script down before I think I'm ready to. When I feel like I'm still struggling with the words, but I'm not at that point struggling so much with the thoughts, and what this character's thinking, what he's trying to do, what's going on here. And then the words start to fall into place. Now, I depend, as you get closer and closer to production, I depend a lot on the stage manager and a crew person to go through and, correct me when I get too far off script. But and they do, but the thing that I learned was I get off script much faster that way than I would if I was trying to do the, word by word by word by word memorization. So I quit trying to memorize scripts and start trying to memorize the thoughts. This is what is going on in this moment in this character's head. And then the words sort of come. I've done a little bit of coaching in the past. And one of the things that I like to use the analogy of, and you probably, again, it's not original with me, but of an iceberg. And the words are just the part that we see on the surface of the water. It's all that stuff underneath that makes the iceberg have any kind of power, any kind of presence. And so that's the part I like to work on, the stuff underneath the water.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such great advice. Especially if we have anyone watching who's an up and coming, actor, a young actor, someone who's just been studying this and struggling. I mean, that's great advice. I mean, what are some other things that you would tell someone, who's really trying to work on their characterization and coming into this?
Again, I'll use a specific example. I did a play. Anything that you can do as far as research is concerned that helps you understand the period, the what's going on with this character. Probably the most interesting process that I ever had was a play about Robert E. Lee.
Oh, wow.
And it was called The Road to Appomattox by a really good playwright named Catherine Bush, who's a friend of mine. And in fact, I was with Kathy when we were in a car driving to New York when she started talking about the idea of this play. So the play I think is an excellent play. And unfortunately, because Robert E. Lee has taken is not considered to be a character worth our study anymore. But at the time, the play deals with Lee's retreat from Richmond to Appomattox, where he surrenders. There's a parallel story going on that's set in the present day about this couple who are having marital problems, but they're on this same route because he's trying to trace his ancestor who was in Lee's army.
Oh, so that's super interesting.
Oh, it's a great play. I love it. But to get ready for Lee, because he is a very complex person. And I think this is probably not going to be politically correct thing to say nowadays, but I think he's taken a bad rap lately because it's easy to point our finger at him and say he was an evil person. And yeah, he had a lot of faults. There's a lot of problems, and a lot of those things come out in the play. But anyway, I still think he's an interesting character to study because if you look at his life and you look at just the different turns and twists that it took. However, one of the things that I did was to research this, and this was a little bit more than normal, but I had a rehearsal a performance at Barter on a Sunday. I left Abingdon to go to Washington, D.C. right after the performance. And the next morning I got up to go to Arlington Cemetery, because that cemetery is actually Lee's property. The mansion there was his home. And during the war, when the Union took over the property and they started burying soldiers there, so he couldn't come back. And that's why we have Arlington National Cemetery. But the mansion's still up there, and there is a Lee expert from the National Park Service that was, working in the mansion. I sat on the front porch at Lee's mansion talking to this guy for 4 hours, just about Robert E. Lee. Stories about him, things about him that you don't find in books. And I read a lot of books too. Then I went to Richmond that afternoon. Next morning I got up and I drove and hit some of the marks that we know about from Lee's retreat all the way to Appomattox. The most interesting part of it was going up into the woods outside of Appomattox. There's a spot, and it's just an opening in the trees with a little marker that says, this is where Lee met with his generals for the last time before he went to meet with Grant to surrender. And Sarah, this was weird, but it's still powerful for me. Having done all that stuff, having gone spot, haven't talked about Lee, and then I was in that spot, and it was such a visceral sort of feeling. That I don't want to sound woo-woo crazy stuff, but there was just a sense of this person and what he was up against that then translated into the performance, I think.
Yeah.
And it was, my point with that when you're asking the question is anything you can do to fill in the blanks of the situation, the time period, the person, and even a fictional person. I mean, there's still a framework around them, but everything you can do to fill in those blanks is going to be valuable, because it's going to take some place in your subconscious. It's going to sit there, and it's going to help define what the character does and how they do it. But again, it's subconscious. It has to be powerful, I think.
It does. And I mean, what a responsibility it is to portray a character, fictional or real, that's such a big responsibility. And looking at that, finding that backstory, finding those internal things, what are they thinking? What are they feeling? It gets back to the whole humanity aspect that no matter what character you're playing, they are human beings, and they may not be us. They may not think and feel exactly how, if I'm playing a role, maybe, I've got to find something. I've got to find some kind of common ground with this character, first of all. And then even though the character may be vastly different from me, I understand, that their approach to whatever it is, they're coming at it from something else. And I always love coming back to the whole villain idea because, it really changed my perspective when I've had conversations about this, and I've listened to talks about this. Villains in stories, they justify what they do because in their moral code and their moral compass, they believe in what they're doing. They don't see it as wrong. We're looking at them as, oh, you're doing this horrible thing. But to them, they're doing what is right, what is good, what needs to be done. And to view, the world in that way, that how we are all approaching things differently. And then to be able to come at a character and to get in touch with, okay, why did they make this decision? What are they going through? Even if I don't understand it, now I have empathy, for a little bit more empathy for other people as well. But yeah, I think it's just, and you've explained it so beautifully. I just think it's an incredible part of it that, when we are enjoying a good film or a stage play, we don't necessarily stop and think about all that goes into that. And that's part of it too, because when you're doing it well, you're not going to think about that. For instance, you're in this play, we're seeing Robert E. Lee resurrected right there on the stage, and that's how we should see it. It's like, wow, this is, you almost forget where you are
Yeah.
And that's the power of being able to really bring a character to life. You said it
Yeah.
way better than I could.
No. You said exactly right. I mean, it is. Those are the moments I can think back on, and I mean, I've been doing since I got lucky, by the way, when I retired from acting on stage. It was right before the pandemic hit. I mean, it was 2 months before the pandemic hit,
Wow.
and so that was like good timing. But the biggest, since I've been doing a little more camera work since then, and which I also enjoy, but it's a completely different process because you don't get the benefit of rehearsal. You don't get the benefit of those. We did a little bit of rehearsal, but not much on searching for the elephant. But it was primarily in that situation. One of the things that happened was trying to develop a relationship with the actor that I played opposite of a lot, and then into studying the script and trying to be prepared for whatever scene we were doing that day. Just to spend the time to kind of indulge myself in all those thoughts. And then we go shoot and see how it comes out. But it's still the same process in its way. It's just condensed. And as far as fun, I think a play is more fun because you have more time to no pun intended, to play.
Right.
To fiddle around and see, does this work? Does that work? Does this make sense? And with the film, you just don't have that luxury. But it's still the same sort of thing. You're still trying to find what the internal life is, what's going on there. Why is this person the way that they are? And you're exactly right. That the great thing about any villain, I played Javert in Les Mis a few years ago, and I mean, you talk about a complex villain. I mean, his morality made him, who he was, which is like, come on, man, just look at the world for what it is, not just for what you think it should be. Anyway, it was. That's another interesting character. That's a villain, but not a villain, but is a villain. But that kind of complexity, which was one of the things. But the music, of course, is what made that play that what it is. But still, the story about these Jean Valjean and Javert metaphorically duking it out all the way through the play.
The whole villains never see themselves as villains. I think it's like none of us, we don't ever see ourselves as, well, I'm a good person, and it's so when we have no problems pointing the finger and going, look how terrible that person is right now. So it's all in the perspective. It's all in that viewpoint.
Well, and hopefully, that's what we do as actors and as storytellers, is that we help what we're doing, the process that we go through. This is all, the weeds. What basically comes out is what you were talking about at the beginning, when the audience views the story and they get engaged in it, and it and it's at its highest level, it gets them to think those very things you're talking about, that they see the world a little bit differently because they've seen somebody a little bit different than they really thought they'd see them. And maybe they see it in themselves, but they certainly hopefully see it in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk about acting in film versus stage. And I don't know if you knew, but so I, on a much smaller scale, but I ran a nonprofit community theater program here locally. Right outside of Nashville for a number of years, and directed young teenagers and college students in this program. And so it was so much fun, and really working with young people when you can get them right there at that. Oh, we've got a thumbs up over here on the screen. Well, that's interesting. Okay. All right. Well, we discovered. This is a sidebar. I discovered recently in recording with some people that you can make little hand gestures on here, and it will give you hearts and fireworks and thumbs up. And so I'll try not to talk with my hands too much because there's no telling what could happen on the show today. So, but I did. I really love working with young people, and you get them, especially teens and early 20s. You get them at this really really incredible, I guess, stage of their life where they're coming into their own. They're growing up. They're becoming adults. They're finding themselves. They're finding their talents. They're really starting to begin to really understand where their skills are and what they love and what they're passionate about. And so it was such a great experience. And when you were talking about a little bit of the differences between theater and film, I will never forget all of the time backstage. We had so much fun backstage, and the rehearsals, all of the comedic things that happen during rehearsals. you're all those outtakes and forever inside jokes that you can share with each other, and just the camaraderie, especially to be able to build camaraderie with young people. That was, and just to see that continue on as they got older. And every once in a while, I'll see some of my students and out somewhere, and it's just it's a callback to great times. But it is very, very different, that live action on stage, in person, in the moment. You only get one take. You're feeding off of that energy and that atmosphere on stage, versus when you're on camera, it's a little bit different. It's different takes. You're out of order. You have to set things up, and sometimes that takes a while. So what is your experience between theater and film? What are pros and cons, or likes and dislikes? Tell me a little bit about your experiences in both of those arenas.
Well, I mean, the thing that you were talking about, the camaraderie that you get in a play, definitely one of the things that I loved about theater. I mean, some of the best friends that I've got are people that I have worked with in time after time with plays, and those memories that you build up, and those experiences that you share, and those inside jokes, all that stuff. That is a big part of the reason that I like theater as much as I do. But also, I love that when you do a play, it's unique. That performance will never be duplicated, and that audience will never be the same. Every audience is different. Every audience brings some kind of energy to the play, and when it's at its best, when things are really rocking and rolling, you feel each other back and forth. You feel the audience, they feel you. It's that subconscious explosion of energy that's going on between an audience and the actors that are on the stage. It just can't happen that way in film. It's just impossible. There's a lot of things that are going on in your brain when you're shooting film that make it tougher to do that. I mean, you have crew around and stuff like that, and they will, but they're not going to respond to you. They're not going to be able to give anything back to you, even afterwards. If the director says, "Oh, that's a good take," that's not that same moment, and that's the thing that I miss the most. Now, turning this thing around a little bit, what happens for me with the acting on camera is you really have to focus on the actor that you're working with, even more than you do if you're worried about the audience that's out there. Because the dynamic, if you're doing a scene on stage, the dynamic is between actors and the audience. There's a triangle going on there. Yeah. But with film, the audience is out there. It's represented by the camera, but you don't want to think about the camera. The camera can't be part of the process. That's the camera person's job. That's the director's job. Let them worry about that. Your job is just to have this moment, either in a soliloquy or whatever it is. But even in those moments, if you're not actually directing action to another actor, your brain has to be so engaged and involved in that moment that you can't be conscious of it. You can't be conscious of it, at least, and it's, again, at its best. I'm not going to say that every time I do something that's what happens,
Right.
but that's what I'm shooting for, And when that happens, that's also very exciting. That's also very, because you get to the end of it and you go, that was real. That what just happened right then was as real as acting gets, because it is just these two people doing this thing. And that third part of the triangle is not really your concern. Your concern is just the back and forth. And that is a different experience, but it's also rewarding. It's also, it's engaging for the actor,
It's more intimate. It's a more intimate experience than being on the stage. Yeah. I also love the difference in, on stage is so much more, it's broader, it's bigger. It's just such a bigger experience. Whereas in film or television, you can get right up into every crease and line and muscle, movement in the face. The audience can have such a very personal and intimate experience with each character and their emotions and what they're going through and body language and all the little quirks and things that make up that character. And not that you don't get some of that on stage, but it's just a very, large experience, and it's just more intimate on camera.
Yeah, I know you've had my buddy Pat Cronin on here.
Yes, love Pat.
I do too. Pat's one of my best friends, and we've been friends for 25 years now. But we talked one time a long time ago when we were talking about the difference between stage acting and film acting. And he may have said this on the show. I can't remember if he said it when he was on here, but he said the stage is a cold medium, and it's up to the actor to provide the heat. And so that's where that idea of it being bigger or larger or more, involved in trying to reach out a little bit. That's the heat. But he said film and TV is a hot medium. The heat is there. It's up to the actor to bring the cool, and not because if the actor adds that same heat that he would use on stage, it's going to be way too hot. So that's always stuck with me, that analogy. And so it's fun. I was actually doing a thing a couple of days ago for some friends for a small project that they were working on, and I was supposed to play this kind of irate neighbor type of character walking his dog, and it starts out and he's supposed to get bigger and bigger and bigger with his upset with his neighbor. Okay. And we were shooting it. And so when it was all the wide shots, I was like just being as wild as I could be, because it was supposed to be not really a cartoony character, but he was not supposed to be what you would normally run into. But then when they got into the tight shots, I realized, I can't do all that stuff again. So then that's when I felt like I was actually acting because I was then having to keep it focused. But anyway, go back to what Pat said. I just think that is a great way to look at the difference between the style of it. What's going on internally, that doesn't change. If it does, then we've lost something. But
right,
but anyway, that's a big difference, I think, between the two.
Yeah. And then, voice acting is a whole other beast where you don't have any of the visual, and it all has to come from here, all of those inflections and intonations. And I've done a little bit of voice work, and that was eye-opening for me and really fun. But it's like you were talking about the difference between being on frame and then the largeness of the stage is you're using different muscles, so to speak. You're using different parts of that ability. It forces you to stretch yourself and really hone in on your abilities and focus on different things. So it's so much fun.
I love voice acting. I love it because of that. Because you can. It's fun. Like audiobooks that I read, I try to give the characters each, a distinctive voice. And fortunately, some of the audiobooks have been science fiction. so you can really have some fun with some voices.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
I was like a talking crab in one of them. But the trick to that, of course, is just keeping the consistency with the character. But it still has to be driven by some kind of internal thing.
Yes.
What does this character want? What they're doing right in that moment? It is different, but it's fun. I love it.
Yeah. And one scene that sticks out to me in something that I have done is a character who in the moment is relating a lot of personal pain, and it's a very emotional scene, and she's crying, but it's not enough just to cry. And especially with the voice acting, we've got to hear the pain, not hear the tears, but hear that pain, and like, that sound when it's that vulnerability, it's that weakened state of a human being, where they're just, it's laid open, and so that's not easy, that takes a lot of work, but it's, wow, is it a beautiful and powerful thing to do. So
Yeah. And it still comes back to the same thing. If you are doing the voice, and the voice is this person is going through whatever ordeal that they're going through. If I sit there and try to make myself sound like that, it's just going to sound like some guy making himself sound like that.
Right.
It's not going to sound like this character going through that moment. So
You have to feel it.
You have to invest in it. You have
Yeah.
to put yourself in there and being willing. That's the thing about acting. You have to be willing to go these places. And sometimes they're dark places. Sometimes they're places that hurt. Sometimes they're places that are fun. But they're always, I think, ultimately rewarding in that, whether it's voice or whatever, that you experience somebody else's maybe life that you didn't have.
Yeah.
A lot of times we talk about it the other way around. We try to impose our memories on this character so that we can get there. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing to do, but I think that when we really work it, suddenly the character is going to take on a life that informs us.
Yes. Yes.
And so that's fun. That's when it gets to be, again, it's fun. I don't know another word, another word to use for it. It's in the same way that I'm not a mountain climber. I'm not about to be a mountain climber. I would just fall off of it. But I know somebody who climbs mountains. When they get to the top, it was painful, but man, oh man, they got to the top of that mountain. And then there's this elation that comes from that.
Yeah.
And I think the same thing is sort of true in acting when you deal with a really difficult situation or difficult character or difficult moment, that when you get there, it might have been hard, it might have been difficult, but there's an elation that follows it it's hard to compare other things in life to that kind of experience.
Yeah.
And I think other actors, they feel that, they know that, they experience that too. And it's what makes the profession, I think, rewarding to do. Because that's when, again, I keep going back to this, but that's when we're reaching the audience on a level that's important.
Yeah. Have those experiences ever helped you in dealing with things in your own life, good, bad, or the other, but just, yeah.
It's hard to say. I mean, I'd be hard pressed to say, oh, this happened in this moment, and so now that's affected my life in this way. I think it's probably a broader thing. I feel like that I am a flawed person. I feel like that I'm not 100% what I should be. And I feel like that is, I don't need to beat myself up over that.
Right.
All I need to do is keep trying to improve, knowing that it's possible, knowing that I see characters, or I have portrayed characters, or have been in situations where this person overcame whatever it was, whatever character flaw it was that they had to deal with. And so, I think in a broader way, it's allowed me to be I'm still kind of tough on myself, but in a broader way, we
all are.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that it's helped me to have a little bit more perspective and say, okay, life goes on. This moment was not everything that you wanted it to be. You weren't everything that you needed to be in that moment. But next time I'll do better because it's
I
possible.
love that.
I mean,
Yeah.
but I'd be hard pressed to point to one thing in particular that said this. Oh, you learned a lesson there, pal.
Right.
I do think that what you're talking about before, the idea of realizing that villains don't see themselves as villains. And when you look at people in the world today and you think, and that's not good,
Right.
then I have a little bit more empathy. That doesn't mean I necessarily agree or say, hey, that's fine. But I do have a little bit more empathy. And I try to let that inform the way that I look at the world.
Yeah. And I think that's important because so often we allow anger to fill us, or we can become bitter about things that we've seen or things that have happened. And something that, I've learned to kind of look at what you're talking about, look at all the aspects of it. Because even if you were, like, let's say you were talking about someone who's had a terrible life and maybe they were really abusive or they just did some really bad things. But at one point in time, they were this beautiful baby. They were a little child, and it's sort of, we don't necessarily know what happened in their life along that course, but it helps me to be able to look at the bigger picture and all the aspects of it, is because maybe the villain wasn't necessarily born a villain. The villain became a villain. So what happened to them? And so not that I ever agree with anything that they're doing, not that I support any of that. It's egregious, but there is still a human being within that villain. Of course, if we're in fiction, maybe it's not a human, maybe it's some creature, but there's more to the story, and there are layers there that are not visible just on the outside. And so I have to remember that. And so I try to approach the world with more of that kind of a view, that kind of a lens, than just immediately, being filled with rage at every injustice. And
well, it's a truth that we live in a very polarized world, and it feels like it's getting more and more polarized.
Yeah,
I feel like that the things that we do as actors can help with that, but only to a certain degree, and it gets very frustrating sometimes to not be able. You think of a show that, and I won't pick one in particular, but any show on television, you can probably over the years find one that is universally loved. And it's universally loved by people who are diametrically opposed on a lot of other issues. Well, this seems like there ought to be some way we can go, hey, you know what? We all love that. We got something together,
Yeah.
And that's a very frustrating thing for me. But at the same time, like you're talking about, you try to be a little bit more understanding of different viewpoints. I feel it that too.
Yeah, it is. I don't know. When you're talking about trying to do things better each time, like that's kind of my definition of growth. It's like we're learning through life and we're growing. And to me, that's part of growth, is sort of always constantly challenging myself in how I look at things and how I do things, and just making sure, because that I am growing as a human being.
Yeah.
So, well, let's do something a little fun. I'm going to get you to kind of like stretch your brain muscles here and think way back.
Remember, I'm doing jet lag. Okay.
Okay. Well, thinking about, because we were just talking about theater, and I was thinking, man, there were so many great moments and performances that I was a part of where there would be this moment on stage, and we all know it, right? Like there's that split second and you make a decision in the moment to say something or do something that is not in the script, but you're feeling it like it's right for this moment. It's right. And it ends up being just this memorable thing. What's one of your favorite of those, or your most memorable time, like where you just went for it?
Okay. So This is funny. I think it's funny. We were doing a play called Dracula Bites.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Okay.
Okay. So, and in the play, they're trying to. It's a community theater trying to do Dracula, and my character Gus was like always trying to make people happy. He was always trying to do what the director wanted, and he would go out of his way to do all this different stuff. Okay. So, and the actual performance, what's supposed to happen is the guy playing Dracula is he's on a wire, and he's supposed to fly across the stage. And then he comes back, and he's just hung in the middle of the stage, just rocking back and forth because the device isn't working. So, in the performance, they get up there, and all of a sudden, the thing breaks, so he can't swing across the stage. So, it was Gus trying to make everybody happy. I said, "Get on my back! Get on my back! Get on my back!" And so he climbed up on my back, and I go carrying him across the stage. And I stop and go back and forth because it's like he's heavy, and I get him to where he needs to go. That was one of the most fun things that I have ever, and it worked. It was just Gus doing his thing in this crazy play anyway. So, I mean, it was but to me, that's one of the most memorable things that I ever did. That worked. There were some things I did that didn't work. But that was in that same play. This is a true story. In that same play, in rehearsal, at one point, I've got my character is he's got like a script, he's got a prop, and he's got other stuff to carry. And in rehearsal, I actually dropped something. And so I go to pick it up, and I drop something else. And then I get picked it up, and then everybody starts to laugh. So then I made a bit out of it. And I was just dropping things like it was like a balancing act. And every night, of course, it was different, but I did it in performance like that too. And it was, that was not necessarily something that happened in performance that occurred in performance, but it occurred in rehearsal that wasn't planned.
Yeah.
And it worked. So kept it.
We had a lot of those. There would always be something that would happen in rehearsal, and I would go, because I watch that and go, wait a second. I'm like, no, keep that, do that again. Let me see that again. And then they did. I'm like, oh, no. We're keeping that for the performance. That's golden. And I love those moments,
I used to be really good when I was younger at physical comedy. I could do a lot of pratfalls and things like that. And we were doing Thoroughly Modern Millie. This is a barter. And in rehearsal, I had on my rehearsal shoes. And so I'm going over, I can't even remember exactly the moment to play, but I go over and they were slick. And so I actually slipped and fell. Big laugh in rehearsal. So it's like, I'm keeping that. And then I just kept building. He probably fell. Trevor Graydon is the character that I play. I don't know the play very well, but he's like this straight-laced kind of guy, but he gets more and more inebriated as the play goes on. And so I was like falling left and right, man. Oh, but that all happened because that first time I slipped and fell accidentally, hey, that works.
Yeah. Oh, those are the golden moments. And that's the stuff you talk about forever. And I love it. Okay. Well, I want to spend the rest of our time, Rick, talking about this jewel of a movie that you have released this year, Searching for the Elephant. I just watched it this week. I watched it. My 12-year-old son and I watched it together, and we both cried. And just moved. What a powerful story. And then the title, and we'll get to that in a minute. And that line in the film of the meaning of the entire title of this movie resonated with me so deeply. So tell me a little bit about your character, about this film, and about the story.
Okay. Well, my character's name is Griff Bowden. Griff is a Vietnam veteran who has a lot of guilt about something. I don't want to give away too much about the film, but he has a lot of guilt about something that happened during the war. And he has become something of a recluse. He lives by himself in his old farmhouse. His wife has passed away. And in the film, his grandson, who is a drug addict and on the edges of being a criminal, gets arrested. And instead of going to prison, he's given a year of house arrest and his mom gets this worked out, or his stepmom actually, but gets it worked out where he has to stay with the grandfather. Now they've not seen each other for 20 years. Well, not quite that long, but close enough. And they don't like each other. The kid doesn't want to be there. The grandfather doesn't want him there. And that's the crux of it. That's the dynamic that goes on.
$10 limit, minimum bet is a dime.
He can't play, he ain't got $10.
Oh, I'll spot him the 10. Sit down, Griff. You're hovering like a vulture. Now, your boss here is a bit of a shark.
Yeah?
He's a big old bluffer.
He's been ripping us off for years. The only reason I even come over here anymore is because he makes a halfway decent beer, and I'm too cheap to buy my own.
You two dandelions gonna yap all night, or we gonna play cards?
Oh, okay, I'm in with a quarter, and I will take 3.
I'm in. Raise you $1. And I'm good with what I got.
Ooh, we got ourselves a card player here.
Max bet is 25 cents.
Now, if he's so fired up to hand over his money, let him.
Bet you didn't know you'd hired you a Sharpie.
He's been full of surprises since he got here. I'll see you, $1. And I'll raise you 2.
Ooh, too rich for me. I'm out.
2? Hot dang, I'm out.
He ain't got anything. He's bluffing.
You still think you know me? I'm all in.
I know enough to recognize a blowhard when I see one. And I'll raise you.
You've reached your $10.
If I win, you're gone by first light.
If I win, I get to stay here as long as I want.
We're still playing cards, aren't we?
It's a bet.
Now, as they deal with the different problems that come into their lives, they begin to see each other a little bit more for who they are and begin to break down some barriers. But it's not until they face sort of a critical moment that a lot of those barriers get attacked. And I don't know how to talk about it without giving away too much of it, but it's I love doing the film. First of all, David Alford and Joseph Stam, who wrote it, and Joseph played Jason, my grandson. I love those guys. I've worked with both of them in other films, and actually with David on stage some. But I love the work that they do. I love the stories that they tell. And David had come to me with this script actually 2 years ago and asked me if I was interested. I said, yeah, I loved it. I mean, I loved the character. I loved the story. I loved what was going on. And then it got put on the back burner. It's like, well, we're going to have to do something else. The distribution company wants to not do that. And then David, about 6 months later, said, no, we're going to do it. So then we shot it in the summer of 23, and at a farmhouse in Southwest Virginia, and it was a great experience. The director of photography I'd worked with before, he's a great guy, Dan Parsons, and then Joseph is one of the most dedicated actors that I've worked with. That kid, to be as young as he is, he's going to do some things. He's just recently released a new short film called Memoria, which is a great little film.
Wow.
But he would be a good guest on here.
We'd love to have him.
David is, and like I say, David is a super nice guy, and I think a good director. And I think that having worked with him on these different films, I watch him grow and watch him develop, and so he tells stories about people and gives them situations that are hard to get out of. And those are the best ones. So I don't know if that answered your question, but
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about the filming process and,
Okay.
what that was like. I love that it was, on a farm. I live on a farm. So I don't know. Here lately, I'm just like kind of engrossed in all things farm life. like I don't know. It feels like the stage of my life is I just need my pigs and my chickens and my pasture. And
My wife and I were just on vacation, and one of my favorite things was one of the places we stayed was out in the countryside. And, it was a moment when we slept with the window open, and the sun came up and the rooster was crowing out there. And it was just it just felt great. But anyway, this farm that we shot on was an old farmhouse. It was probably 150 years old. And because of that, it had huge rooms. And a lot of land around it. So there were a lot of opportunities for different, scenes that could be done at different places on the farm and in different rooms in the house. And the crew actually lived upstairs the whole time. That was their quarters, was the rooms upstairs in the house. But we started shooting, I think on the 5th of July. And most of it was done in that farmhouse. There are some scenes that take place. I mean, there's one that shot in an actual prison that's abandoned now. It's not being used as a prison anymore. But the scenes were shot in it, and it looks so good. And there was a couple of houses that we shot in that were separate because they needed to have a more modern look. But most of it was shot there on that farm, and we shot. Like you said before, out of sequence. That's the hardest thing is you take whatever is the most efficient way to use your time and space. Yeah. So if there's like 3 different scenes that take place in the kitchen, then you shoot those, even though they might be widely spaced over time and things have progressed from the first time we see the kitchen to the last time. But that process is interesting. And it goes back to you study the script and you study the character, you know what's going on in their brain in that moment. And you have to sort of plug that in when you're out of sequence, But we shot every day except Sunday. It was a faith-based film company. And so it was a rewarding process as well as just being fun to do from an acting perspective, because these people all had a great spirit about them. Everybody was pulling together. Great. Yeah, it was really nice. And we would start in the morning, sometimes work till late at night, obviously. You have depends on what's going on and how late it's going to go. But, and we 6 days a week. I think the thing I had the most fun with on the shoot was there's a little car chase scene. It takes up about, 30, 45 seconds in the film. We shot a day and a half to do that. Because we would shoot with one of the cars was on a hauler, and so it looks like both cars are going, but it's just really one car. And then we'd go back and forth, and then I was driving this old pickup truck it was like an old pickup truck, But that was so much fun to do, though. I never got a chance to do a car chase before.
Oh, yeah, everybody wants to do the car chase, right?
Oh, yeah, it was fun, but. And a couple of things happened on it that weren't necessarily expected. At one point, because we have radios in the car to tell us, okay, do this, do that. And then all of a sudden, hey, we're running out of road, stop. And so I'm chasing Jason, and there's a scene where he stops, and then I really had to slam on the brakes and kind of slide right around him. It was cool, though.
Wow.
That was fun.
Wow.
And that's the take that they used.
Well, it's a powerful story. It does have a redemption arc. It does. His character, we do follow so much. It's not, a lot. There's a lot of films or a lot of stories. Sometimes I feel like cut some of that short, where I really feel like we really got to spend more time with him and his struggle and his journey and what he was going through. And it wasn't wrapped up so quickly. We're okay. Now I've learned my lesson. Now we get to the beautiful part. It's like it just kept going and it kept dragging you through that. And it was just so real life, it was very, very real. And, but I love the dynamic between the two of you and, that the struggle that you guys had and this trying to find, some common ground and trying to really reconnect and being almost like strangers, coming from that and then being thrown together. It was just very, very beautifully done. And so there's a quote in the film that ties right back to the title, Searching for the Elephant, that says it's the people in your life that bring you happiness, not where you hang your hat. And that got me. Like, I had to pause it and rewind and listen again because it's so true. What does that quote mean to you? What do those words resonate for you?
Well, that scene, and I know the one you're talking about. It's just, I just love that scene because for me, that scene was where everything happens for Griff. It pivots. His whole world pivots right there. And it's not so much that he didn't know that on some level,
Right.
but it's in the moment that he is dealing with this particular character that says it, that helps him. I mean, it's like a little bit of a crack opens up, and it begins to change his. One of the things that I think that I like about the film is that both of these characters learn from each other without even knowing it.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, I just see this now for the first time because he did this. There's none of that. But they do it. The pieces get broken off that of the wall that's there between them without them even really being aware of it. But in that moment, that's a place where, when I read the script the very first time, that scene was the one that made me want to do the film.
Oh, wow.
It was, and in fact,
yeah.
So here's the other thing. You talk about shooting out a sequence. That was the very first scene I shot.
Oh, wow. And you didn't know that ahead of time.
I did not know that ahead of time. I mean, when the schedule came out, it was like, Dad, I've got to do that first, because that, like I said, it's pivotal.
Yeah.
But it was such a beautiful scene. And the actor who does I actually worked with her before, and she's so great. And that helped a lot because even though it was the first scene, we knew each other. And so there was a rapport that was going on there. That's a good example of what I was talking about, having this back and forth with the actor, and being focused on it. That was one of those moments. But that's, to answer your question, I've gone way too long on the answer. But to answer your question, what it meant to me as an actor was that it was the key to this character. It was the key that everything had to rotate around. And then for the character, it was his life had been what he chose it to be because he shut most of the world off. And then he realized, I don't have a life. What life I've got now is because I have shut all those things off. I've not had those people in my life. He's got a couple of friends, but they're not like they play poker, and that's their
right.
friends.
Well, and I think, in the world we live in, I think we're all, if we're not careful, we're in danger of that to some extent, because we do live in a world where it's very easy to isolate and to stay in our comfort zones. And we don't even have to leave the house. We can work from home. We can order our food in, our groceries in, our whole life can be ordered in. And, that human connection is so important, to reach out to others and to explore that. Everything we've talked about in the show, I think, kind of comes back to that connectivity and how important people are and how much we need each other. And that camaraderie that we talked about. So, and I have to remind myself of that. It is, we have to value the people in our life. We have to see what we have right in front of us. And that can be difficult sometimes, depending on what we're going through. And so, man, powerful line, powerful film, powerful family dynamics going on in this film. And so I really hope that everyone goes out and watches this.
It's available right now. I told David I would put this out there. It's available on Tubi. It's on Amazon, and it's on Apple TV. So those are the places people can watch it right now. I just loved doing it because the other thing is the baggage that we allow ourselves to carry, and sometimes that baggage is there. We know why it's there, but we don't realize we have the ability to let it go.
Mm-hmm.
and because it is up to us to let that baggage go. Sometimes we might need a nudge from somebody else, but that still falls back on us.
Yeah.
And we can do it.
We can.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe we need that help. We need that support,
Oh, yeah.
And so important too that, sometimes we think of carrying our own baggage, but we carry other people's baggage too. And that is sometimes hard to recognize and to realize, this isn't my load to carry. This isn't my baggage that it's not my responsibility. And we take on so much. So.
Yeah. And I think David has done a really good job with this film of approaching and addressing all of those issues.
Yeah. Oh, it's just fantastic. Well, what's some projects that you have coming up? What are you doing now? And then, where, if people want to follow your illustrious career that has put me to shame today, that where can they go and find you?
Well, I mean, I've got a website. It's rickmcvey.com. I'm really original when it comes to names. Really the only thing I'm really working on right now, I'm doing a couple of books for Jumpmaster Press. I love working with those guys too. I first started working with them through Audible, and then they formed their own publishing company. And so I now work pretty much just for them because, I'm still sort of semi-retired. I've done a few little projects here and there, and I will likely do some more, but I don't have anything on schedule right now. So if anybody's out there looking for me, I'm work. My wife just retired. So we're going to try to spend a little time traveling. That's
fun.
And that's like we started out talking about those 7 grandkids. That was, chance to hang out with those guys because they're kind of scattered all over the place. We've got 4 in the Nashville area, and then 3 up in our area in Southwest Virginia and East Tennessee. And I'll take it back. One of them is actually up in New York. He's at West Point. But just trying to keep up with those guys, that'll keep us busy.
Yeah. Oh, every day, all the time. Yes. Always something going on. Rick, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show and talking with me today. It has been a real pleasure.
Well, I've had a good time too. I hope I didn't talk too much.
No, you can't. Listen, when we've got coffee and we've got interesting people, you can't talk too much. We've got great conversation here. So, but yes, thank you so much. And I look forward to talking to you again soon. And
yeah, thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, absolutely.